Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters show, down-to-earth discussions on spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are the most trusted psychic mediums in Sedona, Arizona. We are Rosalind Reynolds, myself, Ivory Lanou, Melissa Brace, and Terri-ann, who is still out on the road exploring the USA with her family. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is the Secret Space Program. If you're tuning in today live with us, you want to ask a question, you can just put your hand up, we'll unmute you, or put it in the chat room. Otherwise, if you're watching or listening later, feel free to email us. It's best if you email. If you put it in the show questions, that disappears sometimes before we can even see it and answer it. But the email address is in the show description. So, this topic, the Secret Space Program, is so darn secret, I never heard of it at all until Roz and our friend, Cowboy Bob, and Roz's boyfriend, Ed, were talking about it when we had our initial live show in Sedona at Relics. Remember that back in the olden days? And that subject came up when we were just sort of hanging out, either before or after the show. And I was like, what the heck is that? So, which one of you would like to begin by addressing what the Secret Space Program is, other than a secret?
Well, I think Melissa has a lot more knowledge about this than I do. I just know little bits, but
I also just know little bits, and it's fleeting because it's such a secret. And the program, the programs that are possibly conspiracy theory sounding are a little bit evasive and fleeting for all of us, even if we know about it. So, yeah, the Secret Space Program is overall about what it sounds. Secret space things, where I don't even know how to start. I'm sorry, I'm having
What's the purpose of it? Like, why does it exist?
I think the purpose is for humanity to move forward and come together in the galactic regions, and kind of, it does have to do with consciousness rising and connection with those things, those beings, those things in that are a little bit outside of our comfort zone, outside of our understanding and knowledge, so that we grow. So again, it's a little bit governmenty, it's a little bit shadow things, but it is to advance, boldly go where no man has gone before.
I was just going to ask, is it something organized by the United States government?
that's part of it.
Yeah.
Part of it?
But it started, I mean, this stuff goes way, way back to when, we had all the stuff in the 60s of them going into space, shooting up the capsule. So part of the original thing of this, and I just Googled this because I was laughing, thinking, I haven't even looked this up lately. I don't even know what it says currently. But in reality, there was just this gigantic excitement. And I don't know, I mean, I was in elementary school when this was happening, like, my first grade, second grade, third grade, kind of in there. And I just remember how the whole country was just nuts. Everybody was so excited. And then, of course, we were in this race with the Russians, who was going to get there first. So there was all kinds of buzz about this and stuff. And as a result of that, the public as a whole, but especially they whipped up the fervor of that with the school kids. And we was one of the only times, unless it was a big event going on back then in school, you didn't ever watch TV. We watched it all. We saw it in our classroom, all the happenings that were going on. And so, I mean, it was actually like a subject that was created. And because all the public was so interested, and because the school children were all kind of whipped into a frenzy over it, we got to go and see, you know, like they would have, I remember, I grew up in San Diego, and I remember they would set up these little events where there was all this information and all these pictures. And then they created a program for children where this was about disclosure, but it was also about what they wanted you to know. And that, you know, all of us, elementary school and then going up through middle school, high school, had these programs and events that we could go and see. And then they had some kind of a program, quote unquote, that they set up for kids where their parents signed a permission slip. They went off campus. They received all kinds of education. Now, in our day and age, it's come forward that a lot of those children were being kind of like mind managed, I guess, about being almost like trained for the potential in the future. They already had far more technology than we were ever being told. And so a lot of kids went into this secret space program to learn about the knowledge and the use of all this technology and how to be acclimated. And I mean, the expectation that I remember was that, you know, first we were just going to go up to the moon, then we were going to go to the planets. Well, you know, there's all kinds of people coming forth now that did those things, that they were taught how to use. You know, was kind of like what we used to watch on the space program, where they're actually showing us the reality of NASA and the space program. But they also had programs on television, like when we were in elementary school, where they were opening the mind on television to the idea of astral travel, projection, you know, wormholes. I mean, all of this really advanced stuff. So there were children that were selected to go through these programs. Melissa, I think, was probably one of their little stars, because she's, you know, very connected with the galactics. I'm far more boring than that. I'm not that connected with the galactics, although they seem to want to talk to me, but okay. So you had to have parent permission to be in all these programs. And there are some people who have come forth that are now adults who are saying, no, my parents never knew anything about what they were showing me and what we were doing. Where I was in school, you didn't do anything without a signed parent permission slip. So I was invited to join these off-campus events that they had. And, you know, my parents really weren't up for that. I've always had a lot of unusual physical anomalies, and, you know, easily could have been a situation where I could have had a medical event or something just as a result of touching something or eating something. Or so I never really went and did any of those things, but I remember the excitement about it. And I remember these kids that were selected to go and participate. And now there's a ton of information. Of course, we're in the age of Google, and there's a ton of information out there. And there are people who are really into this disclosure thing. Some of the names of the people, of course, a lot of people recognize the name of Goode. He's been an acknowledged secret space program participant. There were lots of other kids too. And, you know, I was just kind of sitting in the classroom, but I do have to say that looking back on what they were teaching us, and then looking back on how they use television to mind control, basically, people, and the television shows that were on about outer space, woo woo, you know, it was a big deal. And there was a lot of information there. I'm sure you guys remember watching some of those programs. Star Trek was far advanced in the presentation of what was presented as a potential in the future. And now, of course, we realize that a lot of that stuff was already going on. So it's out there. I mean, the information is out there. I think there are probably lots of people who were involved in these. We had science, a whole like science fair about it. And I remember people being so excited that we were going to be able to beam somewhere, you know, like on Star Trek, that we were going to be able to transport. And now, of course, I mean, people are representing that they do this normally and as a common part of their life. So I think, you know, it really depends on your situation and how open maybe you are to it.
How were these children selected?
I can tell you how I was.
Okay.
I don't know. I think there are different pieces, like pieces of the puzzle of the program. So different layers. And like Roz was saying, the part of mine was to be able to navigate many layers, dimensions, and things like that. So I have stark memory of ASVAB tests in high school. So that would be military background, and there was something that happened, and we did not get permission slips from parents and things like that. So it's a little bit delicate and fragile for me to talk about, but there were others around me in a particular part of the group program. And I don't remember all of it. So there were pieces that were possibly wiped from memory. I think that's that happens to all of us. But there are pieces of remembering how to navigate. And like Ross was saying, like the astral projections and the things that we would call spiritual, I was extremely good at, just out of nowhere, just was. And that's why I was involved in the programs, many different layers of the programs, many.
How would they know that a kid was good at those things?
Well, I can tell you that a lot of it where I was based on, you know, how the schools do standardized testing every year. So they tested your IQ. I was always like off the chart. They tested your, you know, ability to process information. I can remember some of those tests. You know, I thought they were more mathematical, and I'm the most uninterested in mathematics person you would ever meet. But it's interesting because I kind of have a very logical mathematical mind, but I sure never wanted to have to do any. But I can remember, mostly in my case, I can remember 4th, 5th, and 6th grade events. And there were, you know, there were field trips that they would go on. There was a tremendous interest in military in my situation, because I grew up in a military town where we had all the military was there. And that continued on into the time of, you know, we always had, at one point, there were like 13 military commands in that town. So I think they were given test results and looked at people's proclivity to be able to think out of the box. So
Interesting.
Definitely, I can assure you that Melissa and I are very out of the box people.
We just showed up that way. That is how they found me as well. And there's something about the ability. I don't quite know what machine could do this, but to check our consciousness already, like our frequencies already. So that was part of it. But they did with the testing, the standardized testing, is when the adventure began for me.
Yeah, there were definitely some aspects in there, and I actually can remember being incredibly, as a very small child, incredibly interested in space travel, and had, even before I was in school, I had books on that. I still have one of my books, believe it or not, that I had that I loved to read all the time about going up. And it's really funny because all of my life, one of my goals was to live long enough to see Halley's Comet. I mean, that was just a big thing in my world. And I always had some fixation on that kind of travel, like the way the comets travel and the way the asteroids travel. And I always felt like, there were people out there that traveled like that too, or just went poof and traveled. So the poof thing was really good. I mean, I was very interested in that. And I think probably as a kid, if they were looking at you, they probably, the teachers are the first line of everything about kids, and they're so intuitive themselves about kids. And I really feel like probably there were teacher recommendations. I was always in some kind of gifted program, so we got to do extra things and read different books and blah blah. So I think in a lot of our case, it was probably just that we're out of the box. We just didn't think like other people. And then once they started to work with that, I mean, I can't say that I would have had any negative reaction or response to encountering a person or a being from a different planet unless they were scary. And I think they've been here for decades, and they probably look just like us. So I think.
So how long does that last that you're in that program?
There are, I think, different increments. I think Corey Goode, I've seen him speak in person and things like that. That was cool. Was saying, I think 20 years. But there are different layers and pieces of the program. I remember for me, I think it was 20, and it could have been 10s too. But we went, this is Ivory, you're going to love this one, because there were pieces where I remember time travel, and like where Ross was saying, like, you go poof, it was like you were sort of projected into another time and space. And I recall vividly going back in time and doing things. There are layers and pieces. And occasionally I get messages from people that I have to consider as crazy weirdos, like emails or whatever, saying, yeah, I remember you. I'm a time traveler. I remember you from something. And I'm like, oh, good. How will I explain that one? But for me, that was part of my program pieces. And so we went to the past and to the future and to different planets. And they came in 10 increments, 10s, 5s, and 20s. But if you are sent out on your secret space program, sent out to a planet, or learning things, portals, gateways, learning about those things, working on that technology, it's usually a 20-year span. So, and then you are reversed. Mm-hmm. And this is a weird concept. It does sound bizarre. It sounds bizarre to all of us. So if you're gone for 20 years, it's almost like they erase you in your life here. Like, what? Who? What? And then they pull you back, reverse you, and take you back in time and place you back with your memory erased ish, sort of. I tend to get in trouble because my memory was not erased all the way.
Is that why people will have like big chunks of childhood missing?
Possibly. And it's I think everyone is sort of just, there's some kind of energetic blockage to, so it's so shocking and overwhelming. Like, so it's shocking and overwhelming. So if we, 30, 40 years ago said, oh, by the way, I was hanging out with the aliens and I learned how to do secret space things. I mean, you're that's not good.
Be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah. And there's still a little piece of that. I have to tell this story. Rosalind and Ed were my first friends, and they're my best friends here that I met when I moved to Sedona the first time. And they just invited me to lunch, and it was the day off, and we had lunch. And the very first thing that Ross said to me, sat down when I very first met her, she goes, hey, are you Secret Space Program? And I wanted to run to, like, I don't know, Norway, somewhere, because I thought, oh my God, how could she tell this? Like, what? Because I didn't ever want to talk about it. But as the days went on, I thought, oh, friend, she recognized me. And so sometimes some of us in the programs, different programs, just break on through, and we recognize each other. We recognize each other's just really innate strengths and gifts and abilities and things like that we have honed and skilled from the programs.
It's so cool that you go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I mean, I've become pretty convinced that they can clean the mind, they can erase the mind, but they can't mess with the heart very well, because the heart has its own memory. And a lot of the things that you remember, it was because it was a mind and heart experience, and in the case of experiencing going up or ending up dealing with beings or situations that would not normally process as a normal event. I think a lot of those are hard experiences. And you told the story too, Ivory, of where you recognized someone that you had been with.
I was thinking about that last night again. It was just such a crazy, powerful experience.
So it's not necessarily anything always even to do with the secret space events and how they were trying to coordinate that. I think we have memory in our heart that is not able to be removed, and they can't get that managed.
And Melissa, I think it's so cool that you have memories of these experiences, but am I right in thinking somebody could have been involved in that program and not even know it?
Yes.
Many people.
I
have memories too, where there's some of the experiences were very severe. It was not funny. It was not okay. Some of the things that were done to human beings are not okay. And so that got me kind of targeted over the years, because I do remember, and I remember vividly some things. And I think many people don't remember some of the programs that they've been, or have any inkling whatsoever. And one of my another stark memory was, I had a boyfriend for a long time in high school, and he kept saying, do you see that thing in the sky? Do you see it? It's following us. And I thought, oh, great. We were kids. You would have thought we were all on drugs or something. Maybe we were, but but it was, I did see it. And I never spoke of things that I saw, and much of my experience is still, all of us, we experience stuff all the time. And it was a very strong UFO, and it was letting us know day after day, like it wasn't just once. And he finally said, "What is that?" And I said, "Do not talk to that one, because it's one of the darker ones. Like, don't let it, just don't." And so out of my mouth always comes these giant answers like, that's the Pleiadians, and they are helpful in this or whatever. And but that particular one, I just had no understanding that several other people saw it, but particularly the boyfriend that I, spent a lot of time with. He said, "That thing's following us. We're crazy." And I was like, no, that one in particular was just being intimidating. So if you start remembering too much or being aware of too much, sometimes some of it can be intimidating and gross. So it's a little fragile, because it's some of it's unpleasant, some of it's amazing. Like, for instance, I remember a time being in it was quite a big room with different types of beings. I was sort of an interpreter because I can understand the different languages, and apparently I don't consciously always remember that, but I remember several meetings with different kinds of beings. And so those things are normally erased from our memory, so that we go along, and we go to work, and we buy groceries, and we have a picket fence. So that's it's so out of the box that it's hard for our minds to understand and go through. A lot of the secret space people are different programs that I know personally, or perhaps that do speaking, tell about their experiences, have PTSDs or anxieties or things, or sometimes almost remember but don't quite remember, if that makes sense.
What would be some signs if somebody's listening to the show, watching it now, and they're thinking, maybe they have little fragmented information or just a feeling? What would be some signs that a person perhaps was involved in this without their knowledge, or without their memory anyway?
I think Rose was mentioning a few of them earlier, like I personally have had a crush on Leonard Nimoy's Spock since I was 8, which is a little bizarre. But if you all of a sudden understand something, or know something, or go, "Oh, I know about that. That's not the true story," or pieces about like time travel, or I also do not like mathematical things or geometry, I hate that. But if you know a whole lot about it, and it comes together, the science and spirit pieces, all of a sudden you go, "Oh, this is why this happens," and know intricate things about science or spirit or frequency or sound. Those are just some pieces. Or you sometimes have symptoms, like again, like you kind of remember something, or you would know what it would be like. It's startling to be in the presence of extraterrestrial. It's different, it feels different, but if you kind of remember that, or you remember being a child chatting with some light beings coming to visit, but sort of don't remember, some of those are possibly signs that you were in programs, or very connected to some of these secret space projects.
I just remember, and I told Roz about this. This what brings it up for me is, and it stays in my mind so vividly, that my dad, we lived in Urbana, Maryland, and my dad would mow this field in a spiral, and the center of it was where my sister Dee and I would play. And my memories of that, which I didn't realize for a long, long time, are of looking down on that and seeing my little sister looking up at me, and I'm going straight up from that spiral and just out of sight. That's my memory. That's my vivid memory of the spiral. So I just think that's so weird. But when you're talking about the secret space program, like prior to this show, I'd always had this image that they were taking children to a classroom and sitting them down and teaching them or seeing what their abilities were. But you're saying they actually take them to other planets or dimensions.
Sometimes. They did. I've been in some of those classrooms. They're all over the place, and some of them are underground. So then we're going into some things that are not, as we're driving on the highway or the freeway, they're not that in that building. They're possibly in peculiar places. So yes, we were taken to different places and tested and mind controlled a little bit for sure. There were mind things, and to see again, like Ross was saying, what is your IQ? Because sometimes with the higher IQs, even though we might just be interested in potato chips or cats, but they test that and help expand it as well in those classrooms. So I think the second part of the space program pieces could possibly be transferred or transported to different planets and maybe ships and different things with different types of beings, and to learn about, really literally learn about things that are in all the cool shows or not cool shows, like Stargates and things like that. So all the different TV shows over the last decades, you'll get some of those things are real, and that's what we were studying or working on. And if you have slight memory and you go, oh yeah, I know how that Stargate works. I get it. Maybe you do.
Interesting. So what are the benefits that people got from being part of that program, if any?
I'm a little bit cranky about that because the benefits were not so good if they want you to not remember.
Just like used?
Yeah, badly. I think it's not all bad. So when I'm crankier, it is a little bit delicate for me to talk about because of the targeting over the years. So, and also talking to many different dimensions, sometimes icky dimensional things just hate you. So there are many aspects of this, but mostly those are erased, and there are not. Possibly it was good whenever you were there, like you have a paycheck, it's kind of like a job, and taken care of in those ways pretty well. Knowledge, I think knowledge and awakening, ascension, understanding is, to me, the biggest gift that it has given me.
Interesting. Do you know how many people were involved in this program over the years? Nobody knows? Now, I know that there's a person in this area, and I'm not going to name them, but Roz, we've had this conversation that you strongly feel they were part of this program, but they don't know that.
Yeah.
And what was
and
their
I think
experience?
there are a lot of people like that.
What was their experience?
Pretty much the same pattern, being taken to a different location, speaking to people who were identified as scientists, and dealing with, people in higher levels of education and the scientific community. So I feel like in that particular situation, this was, one thing about, you were mentioning, like, are there certain characteristics, or how would people be selected? I feel like there are certain personality traits that people have, and that there is an aspect of what I would call fearlessness. We don't relate to fear very much. So, and when you're dealing with, and that is very much the case, the situation we're talking about. When you're a very young kid and you're not recognizing that anything is abnormal in the circumstance that you're in, you really don't develop any fear. you're just observing, kind of. And the, you know, when I first met the person that you're talking about, and somehow that subject came up, and this is the interesting point that Melissa made. There is some code of recognition. Now, you guys know that I've had these people coming to my office for years going, we want you to activate our DNA. And I'm like going, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Do this.
And then, you know, as subsequent, people would recontact me and go, oh my gosh, you know, it's just you. It's just your frequency. Your frequency did it. And I'm a little hesitant to put that out there because, you know,
we don't need a long line going down the parking lot.
Because I had quite a number of people visiting me for a while, and they would walk in and immediately, that was the thing. That was why they were there. And I felt really clueless because I was like, okay, you know, I have no idea how to do this. I don't even really understand what you're fully talking about, but sit down, take a chair, you know, we'll hang out for a while. Let me see what information I'm sent for you. And so I feel like that there are a percentage of us who have remained in, and I do fit this, and so does the person we're talking about, and a certain aspect of cluelessness about what went on. You know, Melissa is totally, I mean, she has memory aspects, she has a lot of emotional stuff. They messed with Melissa, quite bluntly, in ways that I certainly never experienced, and no one else that I've ever picked up on that experienced. So I don't exactly know how that it all transpires, but there is some frequency that is recognizable amongst all of the participants of this.
It sounds like maybe part of the purpose was to use these people for their skills they have, but also maybe to create some element of people within a generation more accepting of what's coming down the line.
I think that's probably a pretty accurate observation, because I can tell you, you know, if tomorrow a spaceship landed and people came out, I'd probably be saying the same thing I say to spirits, like, okay, hi, what are you doing here? How can I help you?
That's how I feel about it too. Totally.
I mean, I don't have any deep emotional aspects of like fear. And when I have encountered different beings from different, you know, frequencies and locations, I just am not very reactive to that, I guess. And I think it's very interesting because Melissa reminds me, you know, of when we first met. And when I said, were you in that program? Because I don't even remember that, but I remember knowing immediately that I had known her from somewhere, that we had been together in past lives. We both have had experiences where we have memory and have seen ourselves together in the same location, knowing it was us. So I think that happens. And I think that's part of the creation of this, exactly as you're pointing out.
Mm-hmm. And I think some of us who are drawn together, so possibly have similar purposes inside. This is our, you know, our true soul purposes, our inside purposes. And I agree. I've had many flashes of, oh yeah, Roz and I were, you know,
we were here, yeah,
time together, and also in other dimensional things together as well. And Ivory, I have to say, I've had a few of that with you as well. And
exactly.
And so it's not that perhaps I can't prove it, but perhaps we we've been mind erased on some of it, but we
I
recognize.
don't have much of my childhood left, really, bits and pieces. And but I was gonna say, I really think something you said, Melissa, just like jogged this in my head. And I told you this like recently on a show, like when I was always interested in beings from other planets and UFOs, and I don't know where that came from because I didn't grow up with my family's not like that at all into that. And when I was 12 or 13 is when things really picked up. And that's when I became obsessed with, remember, insert that Chariots of the Gods book series that came out. Like, man, I'm obsessive compulsive to begin with, but that's the first thing I remember really diving into, and to the point where my parents were like, we're taking those away from you. It's all you're reading, you're all you're wanting to talk about. So I wonder if, like, one thing people could think about is if all of a sudden they have this unexplained deep interest in alien species and UFOs, like that's coming from somewhere.
Well, and I believe that the four of us, that Terri-ann also, the four of us have been somewhere at a different time in a different frequency and been connected in some aspect of doing similar to what we do now.
No wonder it's so powerful when the four of us are in the same building.
Yeah. And, that certainly was proven true with how we connected with Melissa and Terri-ann. I mean, there's definitely past history that has restructured itself in a different place in a different time. So
very interesting. It's fascinating how that happens.
it
I,
is.
I just think it's so interesting. Like I had this little picture in my head just listening to the conversations that you and Ed and this friend were having. That was, quite a few years ago now. But I just got this thing in my head that little kids like in these little uniforms sitting in a government building somewhere in a classroom. But I really thought, what I thought it was about was finding kids who've got really strong psychic or psychokinesis or anything, any kind of paranormal skills like that.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some methodology, some frequency utilization.
When Ivory, do you remember the time where you came into work? This was, I don't know, 4 years ago maybe. And you said, I don't know if you remember this, but you said, I think I just saw a UFO. You popped in my office and you go, I think I saw a UFO. Is, because we ask me usually, not that I know everything, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's this. And I had seen it as well, but I don't think, and it was close. I mean, close. It was a triangle shape, and it was following you and it was following me. So it was tilting, and it's almost
like highway.
Yeah, on the highway. And I saw it in the same place and it followed me in town. I just had come to work a few minutes before you. And in my head, I don't usually say this. I'm glad we're getting to be able to speak about some of these things because it's hard for me over the years. But that particular one and others I've known throughout the years, I go, that jerk biscuit, they're checking our consciousness. They're checking your light quotient. They're checking your frequencies. So somehow they have some advanced
technology. Oh yeah,
technology, and they would check our frequencies and our frequencies together. They notice us. So it's not that. And I'm talking about extraterrestrial beings working within the secret space program. They notice us, as well as some of the whatever secret people underground, up above the ground, advanced, they had noticed us and they'll check on us. And sometimes if you're too boisterous, named Rebel Me, they'll kind of just let you know to shush. And I think they were checking on us to see with that particular, like what our grouping, like what are we doing? Are we learning too much? They don't want us to remember or learn too much. But I also think all of us with similar frequencies, There's, a couple people in my hometown that have similar frequencies. There's us, and we're always drawn, magnetized. Like I can't help it. We find each other. It's an accident, even if we don't want to.
Melissa, I really wondered if and it's funny you bring that whole thing up about seeing that UFO, is that they will tune in on us and see, like, if we've reached this stage where we can see them, and then that's why they visit. Like, that's why these beings come to us. That's why they come to our office, they come to our homes. They, they don't really, I can't say that they talk with words. They communicate. But I think
telepathic.
check to see if you're going to be receptive before they bother coming in.
Yes.
And then, like, send a word out, because then all of a sudden it just seems like once one comes through, then there's all these different beings coming in, and it's so fascinating. It's like this intergalactic hub in the bedroom most nights. Like, there's these things happening, and it's not really scary. It's just really interesting. Hard to get some sleep sometimes, but thank you, ladies, so much for sharing this information, because I know this is a subject I'm not knowledgeable about, and I was excited about today just to learn more about it. I appreciate you sharing this information. I know our listeners are really enjoying it too. Can you believe it? We're out of time. We get on certain topics and it just zippity doo-dahs right on by, doesn't it? You've been watching the Sedona Soul Sisters show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, please visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. Tune in next week. The topic is Dark Nights of the Soul. What are they? How do we get down into these pits? What leads to them? And more importantly, how to get out of them and how to prevent them happening again in the future, because we want to help you in that way. So have a wonderful week. In the meantime, have a great day.